There's a time for living. The time keeps on flying. Think you're loving, baby, and all you're doing is crying. Can you feel? Those feelings real. Look at your game, girl. Look at your game, girl. What a mad delusion.
And welcome to the second episode of Serial Podcaster. Today's episode is going to be all about the Manson family. A little bit of a different start to this week's episode. The song playing at the beginning is actually sung by Charles Manson. It's called Get Your Game Girl, Love Your Game Girl. It's something about games and girls. And when I first heard this, it was from the movie Charlie Says. Matt Smith plays Charles Manson. It was one of those songs that I'm like, do I like it because it's a good song? Do I like it because it's Matt Smith? And then when you actually hear Charles Manson singing it, you're like, he did some fucked up stuff. Therefore, do I actually like this song? So I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have listened to any of the Charles Manson's music. So yeah, just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who commented, liked, subscribed on the first episode. Super nerve-wracking, but we got here. Just a quick note, if there is anything that you guys want to see me talk about or you want to talk about, please leave a comment below. So yeah, let's kick off to our second episode, and we are talking about the Manson family. So we are going to do a quick glance over his life, kind of leading up to the family, and then I want to kind of focus more on the family. I find it so interesting when I'm reading about it, the kind of what was going on? Let's be real, what was going on? So he was born November 12th, 1934. Didn't have a name when he was born, therefore he was called No Name Maddox. His mum was 16 when she had him. She wasn't exactly mum of the year. She was in and out of prison. Kind of, she would take him on robberies, and it kind of wasn't the best start for him. Not saying that that's an excuse, but he didn't exactly have the greatest start in life with his mum. She put him in foster care, reform schools. Eventually he ended up in prison. I'm trying to be like sensitive with the words that I use, but he would use this thing in prison as like a deter, where he would just act crazy and people wouldn't touch him. And I mean, fair play to him, it worked, except in doing this he became just, some of the things that he did was just crazy and disgusting, and he would rape and all these things in prison. Oh, it makes my skin crawl. Swiftly moving on. He noted he kind of got some of his kind of teachings, his ideals from a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, this is where I'm totally into conspiracies. I have read some conspiracies where people think that when he was in prison, he was put into the MK Ultra kind of uniform thing. For anybody who doesn't know what MK Ultra is, it's a government-led kind of, well, if it exists, it's a government-led thing. Basically, people think that he was put in this program to see if mind control could be taught. That's what I think happened. I don't think he got all this shit from books, that he was just kind of gifted. I think the government had some kind of input in his head, and that's what happened. And that's why I think he was so good, because he wasn't attractive. Like, maybe in his early days, and I try to stay away from these things. It's like the whole Ted Bundy thing all over again. I tried to stay away from these things. Like, he was attractive, but then he just wasn't. And like, he just was not. gonna move on from the attractiveness of Charles Manson. Basically, people think that he was kind of put under this kind of government-led scheme of how to, like, mind control people. Basically, I remember reading something that he said he requested to stay in prison, which is crazy. Like, who would... I mean, if he'd been granted that request, maybe Sharon Tate might have not have died. And, man, this whole situation just bugs me. This is why I'm trying to gloss over Charles Manson. So yeah, he was released in 1967 from prison, 32. He was granted entry into San Francisco, and that's kind of where the family starts. So, didn't have a great life, started off really shitty, was in prison, played insane, did a whole bunch of fucked up stuff, and then moved to San Francisco. It's basically Charles Manson's life. So, when he started, I'm going to put in brackets, the family, he met Mary Brunner, who was kind of the first family member, and what he would do is he would use girls to get girls. So he would use kind of the pretty girls and the girls who were, I mean, this was the 60s, this was the free love, and kind of take as many drugs as you can, and everybody loves everybody. So I feel like if he tried that shit now, that shit would not fly. But this is the 60s, everybody was high, everybody was on free love, so I feel like it was a lot easier for him. So he started with Mary Brunner. In the addition years, the names that stand out when you read about Charles Manson is Lynette Fromm, Patricia Kernwinkle, Linda Kasabian, Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins. They're the ones that, prison time, they're the notable ones. They're the ones that when you watch the films, they have the characters. I'm going to go back to Charlie Sayers. These are the characters that are the three girls that are in prison, and it's from their point of view more so than Charlie's. So they're the ones who are notable. I mean, when you see these girls, if you Google image them, they're really quite beautiful girls, and they're kind of conventionally beautiful. They've got the long hair and the really nice eyes, and they're skinny, and you can kind of see kind of why people would want to go with these girls, because they were kind of 60s beauty, if you will. Now, in November, kind of / December of 67, that was the year Charles Manson got out. They go to LA. He is at this time trying to make kind of leaps and bounds in the music world. Going back to the song at the beginning, when I first heard it, obviously, like I mentioned, it was on Charlie Says, and it's one of those songs that, like, if you hadn't have told me who sang it and you just put it on, I probably would have been like, that's a dope song, it's really quite beautiful, like, okay, I could listen to this. But when you know who it is, and looking back on it now, obviously at the time that wasn't a thing. It was, I mean, let's be real, it was a cult. You can say it was a family, you can say it was a group of people, it was a cult, let's be honest. If you type in the Manson cult, that will also come up. And I feel like this podcast is just going to be all over. I just have so many feelings about this. So please try and stick with me. I really do apologise in advance. So yeah, that was kind of when he was trying to get into music. He learned how to play guitar in prison. I mean, if you're going to learn anything in prison, playing guitar, at least it's, you can make money from that. Moving on from there, it's kind of the early middle part of the year after, 68. They met Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys. I thought Beach Boys were like a really, really old band, and I'm just showing my age, and I'm really sorry to anybody who's listening, and I just called the Beach Boys old. I was reading that Dennis Wilson let the Manson family stay there for quite a long time. And basically what happened was there was a lot of girls and a lot of drugs, and I've just clapped and I'm very sorry. And he racked up like £100,000 debt, which if you think in the 60s, I mean, it's a lot of money now, but like in the 60s, that's ridiculous. And that was like medical bills and food and just a whole host of other things and drugs. And he let them stay at the house for a little while, and Dennis Wilson was trying to help out Charles Manson in terms of getting a record deal. I mean, at that time, I mean, it was pretty cool. Like, hey, where are you staying? Oh, with Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys. I get that. But I'm at the understanding that the only reason that they left was because the rest of the Beach Boys, who I cannot name, please don't ask me to, they were basically like, you need to get the fuck out, dude. Man. I'm probably going to pause a lot during this again. I'm so sorry that it's so sporadic, but I mean, the members of the cult were just kind of imposing themselves on people, and because there was all these pretty girls, and apparently Charles Manson was so smooth talking that they could get themselves in anyway. But like the fact that it potentially like could have ruined, you know, a band like the Beach Boys is it's crazy. So 1968, still November, so we're at the latter end of the year. Is when the Beatles released an album called The White Album. And on this album was a song called Helter Skelter. Now, he's made a lot of remarks. People make a lot of remarks about this song, how he became completely obsessed with the song, the album, and the Beatles. I was listening to a lot of interviews with Charles Manson, and it was like something about angels and gods, and he named the angels as all 4 members of the Beatles, and then himself as God. And you're like, oh man, who listens to this shit and thinks he knows what he's talking about? So he then starts becoming kind of obsessed, like I mentioned. He's telling everybody, listen, Helter Skelter's going to happen and we need to be prepared. We're going to be the ones to bring back the world. It's going to set off a battle. Basically was trying to use it as like propaganda almost. And he would use it, he would say that they're going to go underground and the black man's going to take over and they're going to come back and defeat the black man, and people are going to see them as gods. And they were using the song Helter Skelter as that's what's going to happen, and they really they held on to that. They really, really did. Now, after the song's brought out, so if we go into 69, he was still trying to break into the music world, having no such success. He basically, Dennis Wilson showed some of his, Charles Manson's music to Terry Melcher. He just didn't want to give him a contract. He was like, something's off about him. It's not great. It's not what we want. So he basically goes up to his house, has no idea that he's already moved out, and that is where he sees Sharon Tate for the first time. Now, in July of the 69, somebody sets up while I've been talking about this, completely failed to mention, so backtracking just a little bit there. So he basically, after they get kicked out of Dennis Wilson's house, he finds a ranch, and it was a Wild West ranch. It's run by this old guy who's deaf, more or less blind, and this guy just lets everybody come and take over his ranch that was used as a set in films. And what he does is, it makes me feel so gross to say this, but Charles Manson used to order some of the girls to go and make his life a bit easier. Basically, they were told to do whatever he wants, including literally anything that he wants. And because of that, they were able to stay at this ranch. Kind of, again, just winging it all. Going from the Beach Boys' house to a ranch. Basically, at this ranch, what they do is take a lot of drugs, have a lot of sex, talk shit, because that's what it is. And it sounds really bad, but it is just a whole like bunch of shit. And these are all opinions. Feel free to completely disagree with me, but it was just a whole bunch of shit. Like, I don't find it hard to speak about. I just think that it's, when you look at the murders and when you look at the things that he says after everything comes to light, the murders have been found, they've all been caught for the murders. He was, and I don't want to use the word crazy, because I think that's a horrible word. I just think that it was, what's the word? I think he was just so messed up from the things that had happened to him, and people not saying to him, listen, you need to just be quiet just for 5 minutes. People just let him speak, and they let him think that he was the Messiah, and he was like the second coming of God. He once said that he created God, therefore the God is his best friend. They were very much against materialistic things. So they're all at this ranch. They're all having a good time. I know I was reading, and I can't remember quite who said it, but that they said that what would happen is he would go to this barn on the ranch. We'd all go in, they'd all take LSD, and he would sit and talk. But I remember reading that one of the girls said like they don't ever remember seeing him taking LSD. So if you think about it, it's just like this sober, insane white guy spouting all this biblical bullshit to a room full of girls on LSD. Like, and then you kind of wonder like why they're all such big fans of him. So 1969, I'm gonna get back on track now, sorry for the detour. So 1969 is when some of the murders happen. So Susan Atkins, Charles Watson, Patricia Kernwinkle, Linda Kasabian, who have noted to be some of his kind of most what's the word? They were the ones who you hear about in the history books, and the ones who do the interviews, and they get the movies made about them. Alright, so August 8th, 1969, the first of the two kind of more famous murders, the two that really high profile, kind of the only two that we really properly know about, not probably, we definitely know about them. So the Tate murders, so it was Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Kernwinkle. They go to Melcher's home. Obviously he moved out, there was new people living there. Sharon Tate, the wife of Roman Polanski, director, she was pregnant with his child. Basically Tex Watson was put in charge of them. They killed all 5 people in the home. Sharon Tate was 8.5 months pregnant. Once they'd finished, Atkins wrote pig with Tate's blood on the front door as they left, and kind of that was, obviously with Roman Polanski being as high profile as he was, those murders became really high profile. And that one just makes me so sad, because like I think it was Atkins, please don't like come for me if it wasn't. was the one who killed Sharon Tate, and she was threatening to cut her unborn child. And I'm so sorry, it's so horrible, but these murders were horrible. Threatening to cut the unborn child out of her, and it's like, oh my god, this man fucked you up so bad. Then the night after, April 9th, was the La Bianca murders. Oh gosh. So this time it was 6 family members. There was Leslie Van Houten, someone called Steve Grogan, I think it is, and then the 4 from the previous night drove out again on Manson's orders. Basically, on this one, Manson came with them to show them how to do it. He told them where to go, was telling them what to do, tried to kill somebody, didn't, because he just couldn't go through with it. And then they drove to the La Bianca house. Oh my gosh, this is horrible. So Manson apparently went up to the house first, returned to say that he'd tied the occupants of the house up. He then sent in Watson with Kernwinkle and Van Houten. Basically, Manson pointed out a sleeping man through the window. 2 of them entered, went along with the kind of what Manson's telling them to do. He had Leno, who's the man of the household, at gunpoint, had to bind his hands. Then his wife was brought into the living room. They put the pillowcases over the couple's heads, bound them in place with lamp cords, and then basically sent them in to be killed. The sad thing for me is that Tex Watson had gone to Manson after the murders of the first night and complained that they had like inadequate weapons, which, like, how sad is that when you complain, oh, our weapons aren't good enough to kill people? That's horrible. It's just gross, if anything. So they were given a bayonet, basically. And Watson repeatedly stabbed Leno LaBianca multiple times, and basically the guy was just completely helpless, couldn't do anything. Now, Rosemary was like holding her on for a little while, and I praise this woman. Like, I feel so bad that she died, but like, she held her own for quite a while. She was keeping them back by trying to attack them with the lamp that was attached to the cord that was wrapped around her neck. Like, that's badass. The fact that she was trying to just completely get out of that situation, but unfortunately she was stabbed with that bayonet again. Basically returned to the living room, resumed attacking Leno. He stabbed him a total of 12 times, and he decided to carve the word war into his abdomen. So yeah, after that, it was kind of one of those. Kerwinkle was found stabbing Rosemary in the bedroom with a knife, because Manson had said that the women needed to take more part in the killings. She was stabbed 16 times in the back. Van Houten claimed at her trial that she just didn't know. She was unsure, but then evidence showed that most of Rosemary's 41 stab wounds had happened kind of post-mortem. Now, Watson then went to go clear the knife off in the bathroom, as you do after one's been spending the night murdering. Oh, it's horrible. Oh, it's so horrible. Kerwinkle wrote Rise and Death to Pigs on the walls and Helter Skelter on the refrigerator door, all in blood. So yeah, those are kind of the 2 murders that happened. And I know it might seem like I've not gone into much detail about the family, but I kind of wanted to focus more on what they were doing rather than the people that they were. And I know that sounds like a daft thing to do, but these people were stupid, and they continued to follow his word even after they got arrested and were put in prison. He carved a cross into his forehead and shaved his head, and then so did the girls. And then he carved a swastika, I don't know how to pronounce it, in the middle of his head, and you'd think kind of that would be the stopping point. Then you know that this man who is letting you be in prison isn't all that he's kind of cracked up to be. Through the trials, he would get up and make the girls dance or shout, "The judge is a woman." Like, that's going to be like the worst thing in the world to anybody. Oh my god, you're a woman. Such an insult. The influence that he had over them was terrifying. Like, I always joke on, like, oh, I'd be one of those girls who got, completely infatuated with him. I wouldn't, and I'm definitely going to stop joking about that now. But he had so much control over these people by using love and drugs, and I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that, and it's probably going to sound a little bit tinfoil hat-ish, but I genuinely think that the government put him under a kind of program to teach mind control, because when you look at him, there was just nothing going for him. Like, he could kind of play the guitar a bit well, and he slightly looked like... I think the point that I'm trying to make is just that he was... I mean, he wasn't even involved in the murders. He didn't technically kill anybody, and I think that's even worse. I think it would have made the whole not made the whole situation better, but I think it would have been easier to kind of understand if he had killed people, but he didn't. And he wasn't the people who were going out to these people's homes and murdering, and he was the word of God, as he puts it, and people were listening to him religiously, and he managed to form a cult from his word. And I mean, in prison, even when he was like getting older and looked like I don't want to use the word insane or crazy, but like, he looked like he would needed to be put away for a long time. Like, and I think when you step back, you really just kind of see like this really pathetic man who thought he was God's gift, literally, and managed to convince a whole butt ton of people to kill other people. And as I've gone through it, it's kind of been my skin crawl. And I do apologise the fact that it's been so sporadic, kind of the way I've been talking about it, but that's the way that my mind processes this whole thing. It's... I kind of jump from one thing to another, and I think it's just because I don't understand it, and I don't get why these women did what they did because of one man. Alright, so I'm gonna leave it there, because if I keep going on, I'm probably just gonna confuse myself even more, or get myself more wound up about how stupid these women... Were they stupid? Were they really smart? And he just really dumbed them down? I don't know. I don't want to put more time into this. I always think it's weird talking about these people. Is it giving them more exposure? Not that like a tiny little podcast channel can do that, but yeah. So, I'm going to end it there with Charles Manson. I just want to give a huge shout out to anybody who has shared this, the first episode, who's liked it, who's put a comment on it, who was trying to get other people to listen to it. You guys are amazing, and I really appreciate that, and I think it's really cool that you guys want to get involved with these sort of things as well. Gonna get the third episode up hopefully sometime soon. The next episode is all about Mr. Gein, Ed Gein, I don't quite know how to pronounce it. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did like it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share the shit out of it. Do what you need to do. If there's anything you guys want me to talk about, please leave it in the comments below. So yeah, I shall see you creeps next week.
People look at you today, 20 years later, and they still have no idea what you're about. Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. I'm nobody. I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine. And a straight razor if you get too close to me.